Hello, Super Captain Brave fans. It's so good to be here. How are you today? It's Friday, May 29th. We can believe it's the last Friday of May, right, Kyle? We are here for another story time live with Super Captain Brave Man, and we're so delighted to have on the other side of our screen a wonderful children's book author, Mark Clark. And so while we're here on Facebook, we're just going to make sure that we're getting set up on Instagram. Hi, how's it going, Mark?
Great.
Great. We just need for you to send over a request for us to have you. Everything's good? Yep. Excellent. Oh my gosh, we're so happy. Well, we were so excited to be able to get in contact with you because we had learned about your amazing kids books, which are all about fairy tales and princes and princesses. And so I'd love for you to tell everybody all about how you got started with writing and about some of your books.
Oh, sure. I started writing probably 10 or so years ago. I used to write plays and for the theater and then screenplays. And about 10 years or more ago, I started writing down some of the stories I used to tell my daughter when she was little, when she was like 6 years old. And there was a point where she first started first grade, and she was the happiest little girl in the world. And she started first day of first grade, and she came home and she was sad. And I said, Taylor, what's wrong? You love school. You love being around teachers. And she said, yeah, but they're making me learn all day. And she started crying, so she didn't want to go to school. So I made up these stories to get her out of bed when she wants to go to school. So the princess who always said, I don't wanna, or the princess who hid under the covers. So that's how I started. And my second book happened because we wanted to find a way to give back. And she was part of a foundation called the Ready or Not Foundation based in Corpus Christi, Texas. And they support pediatric cancer research at Texas Children's Hospital. So we went to the hospital and talked to kids in their cancer centers and asked them to come up with titles for a prince or a princess story. And they did, and I picked 5 of them and wrote stories based on their titles, and then gave them back the stories, and they and their family and other schools did illustrate. So I started writing at a time when I didn't get to see my daughter for very long. She was like 16 years old, and I didn't get to see her for a long time. So I wanted to write down the stories I used to tell her when she was a little girl, and I used to tell her stories when she was go to sleep. And I remember this one time in her life where she was like the happiest girl in the entire world. In fact, the story we're going to read, I'll explain later, has a lot of her personality to it. She's the happiest girl in the world. She came home from her first day of first grade, really upset. And I went, Taylor, what's wrong? You love school. You love teachers. She goes, yeah, but they're making me learn all day. And she started crying because she was used to playing her whole life. And so I would go and wake her up in the morning, and I would say, Taylor, come on, you have to get out of bed. And she would say, no. And I go, huh? Taylor, did I ever tell you the story of the princess who always said no? She goes, no. So I'd make up a story about a princess who said no all the time. And she'd forget she didn't like school by the time I was done with the story. But the next day, the same thing would happen. And I go, Taylor, come on, you have to get out of bed. And she'd hide under the covers. And I go, Taylor, did I ever tell you the story of the princess who hid under the covers? She goes, no. So I tell her another story about another princess who hid under the covers. And so it's like 11 different stories of things she would do or say to get out of going to school. I wrote them down 10 years ago, and then
Amazing.
That was my first book, the Princess Fable.
Beautiful. Now, you're going to read a story from this next book, which is called The Royal Fables.
Yes.
And this one has such a benevolent background to it. So could you tell everybody a little bit more about this book?
It happened because my friend and I, my publicist and I, wanted to be prominent in social media. And I said, well, then let's do something. Let's give back, because then when we talk on social media, we'll have something important to say. And since I write books for kids, my friend was part of a foundation called the Ready or Not Foundation that supports pediatric cancer research at Texas Children's Hospital in Houston. So we went there and talked to kids in their cancer centers and asked them to come up with a title for a prince or a princess story, and I picked 5 of them. I wrote the stories based on those titles and gave them back the stories, and they did a lot of the drawings for it, they and their families and some friends. So it's all illustrated by them, and all the money from the book goes to the Ready or Not Foundation, and they double each dollar, and it goes on to support pediatric cancer research at Texas Children's Hospital. So
I love that you were able to parlay your love of story writing into your passion for kids and be able to help that give back in this way. And I think that it's so engaging for kids and fun for them too, to be able to participate and be part of it in the co-creation of the stories with you.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
It's I never thought I had a talent that would lend itself to giving back. You know, like musicians and singers and entertainers, they can do benefits and stuff like that. And I thought, what do I have that where I can give back? And it's amazing to be able to find something. So
yeah. So tell us about the story that you're going to be reading about the little girl and what that is.
So I'm going to read The Princess Who Loved Wildflowers. And the little girl who at Texas Children's Hospital that we met, her name is Brinley Purtle. And at this time, like 6 years ago, I think when I wrote this, Brinley Purtle was 7.5 years old and lives in Texas. She was diagnosed with leukemia, ALL, in 2010 when she was 3 and a year and a half old, 3.5 years old, and went through over 2 years of treatment at Texas Children's Hospital Cancer Centers. She was in 2nd grade when this was, and she loves animals and crafts and drawing and plays softball. And this is a picture. I don't know if you can see her. Isn't she cute? She was adorable. And her idea for a story was the princess who loved wildflowers, just because she likes wildflowers. And I took most of her character, or a lot of her character, from my daughter. Her name is Taylor, because she just loved everything. And she was happy. People used to say, they visit us and go, you know, when I die, I want to come back as Taylor. Because and she also, as the girl in the story has, she also had this thing when she was young where she would have a fit, where she would get caught in the middle of a cry and have a fit, and I put that into the story as well.
So whenever you're ready, Mark, we'll go ahead and have you read the wonderful story, The Princess Who Loved Wildflowers, from the Royal Fables. I think that that's one of 11 of the stories that is included in this book. Is that correct? Did I get the number right?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, super. So go ahead, and we are looking forward to hearing it anytime you're ready.
So this is Brinley Purtle's The Princess Who Loved Wildflowers by Mark Clark. That's me. To tell a tale of princes and princesses, kings and queens, you often say it happened once upon a time. This story may have happened twice or more. I can't say. So that everyone can accept what happens as possible, we place the land far, far away, when it could have been in a field or a valley as close as your own backyard that's been covered over by centuries of wind and rain. Again, I can't say. Here's what I can say, and what I know for sure. This was not a kingdom with castles and moats. This was not a land filled with knights in armor and ladies in tapestry gowns. The people were farmers and shepherds and the like. They fed off the land and celebrated the gifts supplied by the earth. The kingdom sat at the foot of a mountain and spread out for miles throughout a fertile valley, wide, sparkling river rambling beside it. The animals that fed and worked for the people were plentiful. The land was rich, and the plants and trees bore fruits and vegetables that graced tables. The people's skin was a beautiful brown color. Their eyes were bright, and they lived a mostly happy life. At this time, in this kingdom, there was peace and life was good. Not for everyone, every day, of course. Really, when does that ever happen? At this time, it did. The king ruled because he was the best man to lead, not because he was born to it or killed the former king to take the throne. His people made him king because he deserved the job. He took a queen, a wife, who was the most giving and the most loving. Into this almost perfect time and place, the king and queen were graced with what they believe was the most perfect gift of all, a daughter. And her name was Zari, which means golden. From the moment she opened her eyes, Princess Zari looked at the world as though it was all made for her, as though if it were a toy for her to play with, and it made her laugh out loud. They say that babies can't actually see faces or understand words, but Zari would have proven them wrong, because she looked directly at everyone's face and listened intently to what they said. And what she saw and what she heard thrilled her no end. You've never seen a baby so happy, so excited about everything the world put in front of her. She was, as far as anyone at that time had ever known, the happiest baby that ever lived.
Amazing. Mark, I'm going to have you reconnect to Instagram because we lost you again. I was just waiting for a beautiful pause in your story.
I'll keep looking up in case it happens again. So I'll stop doing it.
Perfect. Thank you. We just want to make sure that our Instagram folks can also see and hear your wonderful story.
How are we? You think we're back?
Okay.
It looks like
my folks will let me know when you're back. Not yet.
No.
Yeah, looks like maybe there's just a connectivity issue with Instagram right now. Thanks so everybody who's being so patient on Facebook. Yeah, we're gonna get this going.
See if I can find a stronger signal.
Okay, and if not, then no worries. We'll just continue on Facebook and we'll repost it.
See if that does better.
So your area is like our area where the Wi-Fi goes in and out and the cell service is not always that reliable.
There we go. How's that?
Okay. Yeah, there we are. Okay, let's have you continue with your beautiful story.
Okay, so just keep going. Where was I? She was the happiest baby that ever lived.
Yes.
I can't say for sure that she was truly beautiful. Don't get me wrong, she was adorable. But her beauty had just as much to do with the joy she spread to everyone she came in contact with as her actual features. For the most part, people are judged on whatever the current idea of beauty is, full lips or a small nose or a strong jawline, high cheekbones or dimples. Then sometimes you can't explain why you find someone so attractive. They just glow. And that's what Zari did. She glowed. Now you'd think that as she became a toddler, then a little girl, her fascination and sheer happiness with the people and her surroundings would fade away, but would be wrong. She kept the same love of life every day, every week, every month of every year. That's not to say that the princess didn't get hurt or ill or suffer in any way. She did. In fact, she may be even more bruised and injured more often than most because her outlook was so sunny and positive, she tended not to see things as dangerous or harmful. The candle that danced so gleefully in the dark, casting graceful shadows on the walls, it seemed impossible that it would burn her so. That something as delicately lovely as a rose would be covered in thorns that pierced her skin. That animals of every kind, so soft, so fascinating, could suddenly turn around and bite or kick her. To the princess, these were all brutal surprises. Zari's reaction to harm was so extreme, going from complete joy to startling pain, that sometimes she would faint. She would cry so violently that she wasn't able to breathe, and she would pass out and fall to the ground. No one could do anything to help. All they could do was hold her until her breath came back. It was awful to watch, heartbreaking for the king and queen. They worried, and rightly so, that their little princess couldn't handle the harshness and difficulties of life. For even in this peaceful, quiet land, life could be hard. Homes were modest wooden structures. Where the royal family lived, the house was much larger, but not fancy. Always exposed to heavy rains, to winds and storms, cold and heat, wild animals, poisonous insect, danger everywhere if you weren't aware of it. The princess clearly was not. The king and queen weren't sure if it would be better to try to protect Zari from ever experiencing anything painful, or to make sure that she faced things head on so that they wouldn't be such a shock to her. Like many parents faced with a hard decision to teach their child, they did neither. But then most parents aren't blessed with a daughter like Zari. There are very few people like her in the world. Someone who sees the best this planet has to offer and does the same with everyone they meet. Everyone, someone who truly listens to you, someone who truly cares and cares for others, someone whose gift of happiness is given freely and without question. They are the closest thing to angels on earth. Now, this is a good time as any to tell you that Princess Zari's favorite thing in the world, and you may have already guessed it from the title, was wildflowers, which really were the only flowers back then. There weren't any stores or florists. The first time she came upon a field of flowers, she was a little princess of 5 or 6. They don't celebrate birthdays as we do now. They just counted how many seasons reappeared. We repeated. So if you were born in the spring, as Zari was, they would remember that she had seen 6 of them. It was the first time she'd gone with her mother, the queen, and the women of the tribe to the great river to fish. All along the banks of the river were miles and miles of rolling hills covered with wildflowers. It was like coming upon a sea of colors waving in the wind. Zari ran ahead of the women through the flowers with her arms spread out and her smiling face aimed toward the sun, laughing out loud. For her, it was as though she was floating in a dream. So much beauty, so much warmth. She lay down among the flowers and smiled at the sun. She was certain it smiled back. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much." From then on, she found out everything she could about fishing from anyone in the village who could teach her, because she knew it meant spending time near her wildflowers, walking through the fields before the women began in the mornings, and simply having them around her throughout the day. She felt like she was where she belonged, where she was meant to be. She had found her place, and she was happy. Well, since she was always happy anyway, I guess she made her happier. The king, already proud and grateful father, became even more so as he watched his daughter grow into a young woman and take her place among their people. He saw her develop into the most skilled fisherwoman in the kingdom, learning from the old women and encouraging the young. She relished every part of it, and her joyful outlook spread to the women around her every day. People would say that the princess didn't need a net or a spear. She could charm a fish into her hands. This day, she had done what she had done most every day for years. Princess Zari ran ahead of the women to spend time among the wildflowers, walking and smiling and celebrating the simple beauty that was her life. This day was different. As she leaned in to smell a bunch of violet, budding flowers, she felt something move across her feet. Curious, she spread the leaves apart to see a bright green little snake. "How beautiful," she said as she leaned in closer. Then the snake did something totally unexpected, not to you and me maybe, but certainly to the princess. It opened its little mouth and bit her on the leg. "Ouch," the little princess said. "Why would you?" Zari never finished her thought. Something was happening in her brain that distracted her. Then it moved into her body. She could feel a kind of heat starting where the snake had bitten her on the leg, quickly rising up her leg, through her stomach and her chest, and even through her entire body. Suddenly, she was burning up. Her only thought was, "Perhaps if I lie down in the cool grass, I'd feel better." That may have been what she thought, or it could have been part of a dream, because Zari couldn't tell whether she lay down in the grass or fell or fainted. Any of those things were possible. All she knew for sure was that everything went dark. When she opened her eyes, nothing was the same. She couldn't put her finger on it right away. It was as if somebody had painted the whole world while she slept. She must have slept, everything was the same, yet not. The sky above was blue, but a brighter, bluer blue. The clouds were white and fluffy, but seemed puffier somehow, with a shine to them as if they'd been outlined in gold. Her mother's face appeared before her. Zari saw what she was saying, but couldn't quite make it out. She could see her lips move, but couldn't make out what it was that she was saying. Everything was moving so slowly. She thought that perhaps she wasn't quite awake yet, that she was caught between dreaming and waking. Maybe that's what was happening. The princess felt something near her head and turned slowly to find out what it was. Through the stems and leaves of the flowers and blades of grass, she saw the snake that had bitten her. Its quick red tongue darted out and back and looked as though it was smiling. Then it spoke, which for some reason didn't seem strange to her. "You'll be safe, princess." Zari nodded in agreement, and the snake slithered away. Then she turned to see the pained images of her mother and the women staring down at her as she smiled at the beauty of them. Her mother's mouth moved, but the princess still couldn't make out the words. Then the queen took her in her arms and held her. Her mother's touch was different than she'd ever felt. Princess Zari knew that her mother held her in order to give her comfort, but her skin was cold and somehow it felt like fear. Zari could feel her mother's fear. She wanted to say something to reassure her, but wasn't confident that she could speak yet, so instead she just held her mother close until the warmth returned to her skin. That was how Princess Zari saw the events, but it's not at all how the queen and the other women witnessed them. They saw the princess stop in the field and look down, then watched as her body bolted upright. Her arms shot out from her sides, frozen for a moment, and then her entire body started shaking. The women cried out to Zari and ran to her. They watched as the princess fell backward to the ground, still shaking. When they arrived, Zari's body was silent, her eyes open but not seeing, her skin cold. Many feared the worst. An older woman discovered the blood and bite mark on Zari's leg and knew immediately what had happened. She informed the queen that her daughter had been bitten by a poisonous snake, and she immediately sucked the poison from the wound and spit it out. Suddenly, the princess's head jerked sharply to the side for a few moments. Then her head returned to face them. Her eyes blinked, and she began to focus on the queen. "My daughter, my beautiful daughter," was all the queen could say as she looked at the little princess in her arms and held her. Zari whispered to the queen, "You will be safe, mother. I will see to it," and held her tight. The queen was confused by the words her daughter spoke, but then felt an overwhelming feeling of warmth and knew immediately that everything, not just her daughter, but everything would be all right. It was a calm like she'd never known. From that day forward, it was as though the world was separated into two places. How the king, queen, and everyone in the kingdom saw the princess, and, in turn, how Zari saw the world. To everyone else, it seemed as though there'd been a poison left in her body from the snake bite, and that it made her slightly crazy. She'd wander off into field of wildflowers and lift her face to the sky, standing there for hours. She would talk to flowers, trees, animals, and insects. She never simply looked at you. She would stare at you as though she could see inside of you, see your secrets. When she spoke to you, she would always tell you that you'd be safe. And then she'd touch you, and whatever seemed to be troubling you would fade away. So maybe she was a little crazy, but it was a good crazy. It was a kind and loving and giving crazy. Zari understood how everyone saw her. She didn't really know what it meant to be crazy, though. If it meant she saw everything completely different than everyone else, then she certainly was. If it meant that for her, it was as though the snake had opened up a door to another world and she floated through it happily, then she certainly was. She adored the world already, but this new version of it was even lovelier. In this new painted life, everything was more alive. Everything took on qualities they didn't have before. Colors had feelings attached to them. She could feel the coolness of blue, the warmth of yellows, the comfort of browns, and red burned hot to the touch. Flowers and trees would sing to her as the wind whistled through them. Every animal and insect spoke to her, not with a voice necessarily, yet clearly the words would come to her. The princess would coax a bumblebee out of a flower, and the bee would tell her how each blossom offered up its sweet nectar to her, and how she would leave some behind in the next flower. And in that way, she helped the flowers spread, and they helped her gather the sugary essence of honey. The bee would lead Zari to her hive where the queen bee would happily share some of their swarm's syrupy sweetness. A mole explained why living underground was so practical. You were protected from the wind and rain, and it was always cooler on hot days and warmer on cold ones. A spider taught her new ways to sew and stitch, which she passed along to the fishermen to create stronger nets. An owl taught her how to keep her eyes wide open in order to take in every single thing around her. An ant taught her how important it was to work together. A cat taught her about balance. A salmon taught her about persistence, and a nightingale about how singing released your soul into the world. A mosquito shared with her how fleeting life can be. She would only exist for a month. Zari told her, "You should taste a bit of my blood, little mosquito. It has magic in it to show you a world of love." "Oh, I couldn't pierce her skin, sister. I wouldn't want to hurt you," said the mosquito. "Haven't you taught me how quickly life passes?" "I'm sure the pain will fade soon enough," said the princess. "It will be my gift to you." "My sight is poor. It may not work on me." "You will see with this, I'm sure," Zari told the mosquito. She dipped her nose into the princess's skin and sipped some of her ruby red lifeblood, and she did see wonders, images that made her wings flutter uncontrollably. A mosquito's vision is terrible. The world is a series of murky shadows. Imagine living your life with a dark cloth over your eyes and then having it removed on the most beautiful day of the year. If mosquitoes could yell, she would have screamed her lungs out with joy. Well, she would also have needed lungs, which she didn't have. If mosquitoes had lips, she would have kissed Zari 1,000 times. Every creature was a teacher for Princess Zari. She didn't question that a spot of poison might be flowing through her bloodstream. She knew that a bit of poison was a cure, not an illness, just as a brush with death might make you more alive. Small doses are life's pleasures. It's large amounts that create its sorrows. So one day, Zari found herself in the field of wildflowers with the rain pouring down all around her. She didn't mind the wet. She never did. It was the third day of a constant rain. The trees drooped their arms from the weight and the wind. The river was high and furious, and the sky cracked with anger. It was then that the snake slithered across the princess's feet once more. She hadn't seen him since that day, and she smiled to welcome her old friend. "It's time, princess, to save me now." With that, he slithered up her leg and rested in the folds of her gown. She didn't understand at first, and then she remembered her lesson from the owl and took in everything around her. The mole and his family were out of the ground and fleeing. Squirrels were scurrying, foxes slinking away, all toward higher ground. It was when a family of beavers stopped to tell her that all of their dams had burst that Zari fully understood. She ran as fast as she could to her mother and father and told them plainly, "Please, heed my words. Your Majesties, we must leave, and we must leave now. Could you gather everyone in the valley at once and implore them to take only what they can carry and head for the mountain at once, please," she urged. Now you'd think that grown-ups, especially a king and queen, would at least question a little girl who was telling them to leave behind everything they had in the world. But they barely hesitated before ordering their men to do exactly what the princess requested. It was very strange, but no one was afraid. No one questioned for a moment. Princess Zari had touched each of their lives in one way or the other and instilled in them a calmness and a confidence that they would be safe in her care. And they were. Thousands of people left their homes and most of their belongings and followed the royal family out of the valley up into the mountains. From where they stood, they watched the river explode its banks, tear across the land, wiping out their homes and villages, farms and orchards from the face of the earth. For a full day they watched until the waters reached their height and finally subsided. The following day, after the rains had stopped and the sun had found its way out from behind the clouds, Princess Zari made her way down to the edge of the newly formed lake and knelt beside it. She saw her reflection in the water. She seemed strangely older. Then she realized, with a slight hint of sadness, that everything around her had returned to normal. Whatever the gift of sight she had been given had vanished with the rains. Something wriggled near her stomach, and the snake appeared from the folds of her gown where it had taken refuge. It slid down her leg and slithered away without a word. She wasn't really sad. She was mostly grateful to have been allowed to see and hear and learn so much. Just then, a wildflower floated by, and she scooped it up in her soft hands. Zari inhaled its perfect beauty. "I'll plant you in our new home," she said to it, and smiled. And that's the end. Oh, thanks.
Beautiful, beautiful story. Thank you so much for reading that to us. Again, this was the story from the Royal Fables, and this one was called The Princess Who Loved Wildflowers. And I would love for everybody to know where they can find this book and remind everybody who the proceeds go to help support.
Oh, yes, it goes to the foundation it goes to is called the Ready or Not Foundation. I can post this in places too if I haven't already. And they support the Texas Children's Hospital, their cancer centers, and it's for cancer awareness. It also, some of the money also goes to Ronald McDonald Houses, which are great organizations as well. So all the money from the book goes to them. Whatever wasn't spent on making the book goes to help other children. I think it's a great way to do that. And there's good stories in it too. And I really enjoyed reading it. That's one of my favorite stories because it's so much like my daughter that I like telling that.
Well, it's a beautiful story, and people can go visit your website and actually find and purchase these. And so if you want to tell everybody what that URL is.
That's the best place because more money goes to where it belongs. You can go to the website, which is thefableskingdom.com.
Thefableskingdom.com. Got it.
And thefableskingdom.com/store will take you right to my store.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, we appreciate you coming on to our final Super Captain Brave Man story time today and for sharing this wonderful story that you wrote for such a good cause. And I know that Kyle has enjoyed it. He actually got a chance to preview that story last night, and I know that he really loved it. And the images that I was showing on our side of the screen were actually drawn by children at the hospital. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. So they did all the illustrations, their family, some friends, and some school.
So beautiful, so beautiful. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us today who's been watching, and I want to encourage everybody to find out more on SuperCaptainBraveMan.com. You can find all of our books and some fun things that you can download there. And we are also having a site-wide sale, which is Super20 is the promo code to get 20% off of anything on the Super Captain Brave Man site. And in the meantime, I just want to wish everybody a wonderful summer. It's been such a pleasure doing these live streams 3 times a week. We're going to take a break and enjoy some sun and try to get a little bit of fresh air ourselves, right, Kyle? And when we post this video on Facebook and on Instagram, we can actually ask everybody to tag 3 friends, and you can be in the running to get one of these really cool shirts that that Kyle has on here. And we have them in adult sizes as well as kid sizes. And so there you go. We appreciate it. All right, I'm going to sign off. Thanks again, Mark, for everything, and we will talk soon.
Thanks. Thanks for glad to join you both.
Bye-bye.